Welcome to This Week from the Principal's Desk, a podcast about Christian schools and their leadership. This podcast is hosted by two Christian school leaders. My name is Rob Lunak, and I'm the superintendent of Lutheran Neighborhood Schools in Milwaukee, Wisconsin.
And my name is Mike Schiemann. I'm the executive director and head of schools at Trinity Lutheran in Bend, Oregon. And today for our show, we're excited. We have a special guest who's joining us, an author that Rob and I are just starting to get to know a little bit. And I'd like to actually turn it over, Bryan, to you for a quick introduction of yourself. We're welcoming Bryan Wetzel onto the show. Maybe tell us a little bit about you and your background and whatever else you want to share with our listeners today.
Sure. Well, first, thanks for having me on your podcast. I'm very honored. I have a long story of how I got to this point, but I started out more in production. I started out in photography production for commercial, moved into television and movies, mostly television and commercial stuff. And I did that most of my career, but in the early, well, right at the beginning of 2010, a friend of mine and I got together and we had this idea to create take the curriculum from K through 12 and break it into small little video pieces and actually have a real teacher in the video, still in that you could see, so it wasn't just a voice. And we created 1,500 videos and we went out and marketed those. And then we had assessments that were created by teachers that we hired. And we began marketing that around the country. And I was making speeches to all the different organizations and the principal meetings and district meetings and you name it. And then I would be speaking to teachers and principals, district heads. And it was during that 5 years, 6 years that, and seeing the differences in schools around the country and getting the whispers that people will tell you, hey, you don't know this, but you should know this. That was kind of alarming. And I just felt like I wanted to write it down in a book. So in 2017, I started writing, and then I was researching, interviewing teachers and interviewing administrators who were retiring because they're the only ones who would speak to you truthfully. Mm-hmm. And then I got halted by COVID because we had two businesses that were suffering under the lockdowns. I took it back up in 2022 and began doing more research and interviewing more teachers and then I took all of that information and put it together in a book that I thought that people should kind of understand what it is under the hood of most public education. It's very dysfunctional. I think anybody would disagree with that. But what are the real problems? I think that when I hear people talk about the real problems, they have like one or two things or maybe three. I always hear about money or salaries. It's much deeper than that. And salaries, when I interview, I would ask all the teachers that I interview, it was 169 of them, I ask them in order of 1 through 5, with 1 being the most important, why did you leave the profession when you did? Because many of them leave before their time. And pay was number 3. Behavior was number 1, and stress was number 2, and that was a very close number 1 and number 2, both of those. And I just saw a lot of things that just didn't make any sense to me that's going on in the education industry, and it's different from state to state. But I just really felt strongly that people should hear about some of what teachers were telling me. And you don't hear a lot from teachers because they're afraid to speak up. And so I just felt like I could be that voice.
Well, I'm excited to have you on and to talk about some of these things. I know it's definitely one of those things. If you're in a school, in a public school, like, you'll find things that you like or don't like, and I think there are certain things that you maybe take for granted as the wallpaper. Well, we have to do it this way. It's always been this way. So I'm interested to hear your kind of outside perspective.
What's funny about that is when I first started doing it, And remember, I was coming from production industry, even though, but my wife, who I just married, is a public school teacher. I should say that as at least in the disclaimer. And I had kids in the system. I thought after I got a peek behind the curtain that I would come out of it. So I kind of understand why they're doing some things. And actually, that was not the case. I think I was actually more perplexed in certain instances. Um, and so I tried to make sense of a lot of them, and I just couldn't. And so when we sold the company, first of all, my partners wouldn't let me write the book while we still had the company because we would have been blackballed. Um, I just decided I wanted to write this book, and I spent a lot of time on it. There's about 4 years of research and interviews collected to make that book what it is. Um, and it's just really more of a snapshot of what's going on overall.
Hmm. Well, is that something, Brian, maybe we could dive a little bit deeper into? So, I mean, you've kind of given us your top three. Um, Maybe, I guess, how are those three indicators in teachers, how are they manifesting themselves? How does it get to that point where we're ready to leave the profession
Mhm.
based on those things? I don't know if that's something you're interested in unpacking kind of point by point to say these are the signs we can be watching for as leaders in education.
Yes. So one of the things I'll tell you this. One of the most common questions. So when we would, our product was cloud based, and when we would sell it to a school, we would go to the school and talk to the teachers, show them how to use it. Early on, when we didn't have a lot of money, I would go and do it. The most common question I would get from teachers was, "Are y'all hiring?" And that was kind of sad, I thought, because these are, in most cases, this is a teacher that's gone through the education, done the TOS, which is, their time being in the classroom and learning or being mentored by another teacher. They've gone through all of that, and now they want to leave the profession. The profession is so full of stress, and a lot of the stress is related to behavior. Y'all are private schools, correct?
Yes.
So I don't know how you handle. So one of the things that whenever I would talk to someone in public school, they would say, "Well, private school does better because they can get rid of kids that are disruption." And I used to say, "Well, if that's all it takes to make the public schools better, then we should be having that conversation." I'm not saying we should throw them out and never educate them, but maybe there's something that can be done. We can move them to an alternative school. We can move them to an alternative um, method. But in most cases nowadays, a lot of teachers, and I know two teachers dealing with this right now. They have students that are a bit violent, curse them out, are interrupting class every day, and the administration does not want to remove the child because they don't want to get into it with the parents. They don't want the parents to go to the district. And so what you have is a teacher who is now has no support from their administrators. Um, I know of a teacher 2 years ago who had her arm broken by a student. The student was back in the class the next week.
Hmm.
Okay, that is not helping you keep your teachers happy.
Mhm.
And I think that what people need to understand, and I'm surprised that public school administration doesn't, and I don't know where that disconnect is, because most principals taught at one point, I would think, um, is that a teacher who has experience is so much better in the classroom, so much more efficient. One of the things when we were picking teachers who were nominated to do our videos, I wanted them to be in that grade level for at least 3 years or more. Because a teacher who has taught a lesson repeatedly knows what questions they're going to get. They know where the students are going to be tripped up, where they're going to have some troubles, and they have adjusted their lesson over the years to account for that. And so they're much better at teaching something in the third, fourth, fifth, or beyond than they were the first year they taught it. But you have nearly 50% of new teachers won't make it in the profession past 5 years. That's a sad reality. And it doesn't seem like anyone is doing anything about it. In fact, they're doing the opposite. So in New Jersey and several other states now, you don't even have to be a certified teacher to be in a classroom because there's such a shortage of teachers. You can just have an 850 on the SAT and you can be in the classroom next week. Now, here's the stupidity of that. You haven't alleviated the stress that pushed the teachers who were qualified out of the profession. How long do you think these people who originally weren't teachers going to last in the profession? Um, but there doesn't seem to be a recognition of the fact that the teachers are stressed out, they're overworked, they've had way more piled on them than they had, say, 20 years ago or 10 years ago. Many of the teachers that I interviewed who were in the profession 25 or more years that were retiring, they would tell me that what they've seen change in schools is drastic, from not handling education to the workload being higher than ever, cutting back budgets for assistance in the classroom for kids who are struggling. And then there's just the matter of several schools that I visited had so many kids now autistic in the class or in the schools that they had separate rooms set aside and they didn't even really have the space for it. And they didn't have teachers who wanted to teach in those classes. In one school I was in my final year, they had six different teachers in the class that managed the autistic room for the kids who were really severely autistic. Nobody wanted to be in there. So we're essentially just housing the kids in the room all day. We're not really benefiting anyone. None of the kids are getting any benefits out of that. The teachers aren't able to help. And so I knew a lot of teachers that were burned out and told me that they had sort of made peace with the fact that they weren't going to be able to help enough. One of the other things too that gets overlooked, and I don't know how y'all do it in private school, but in public schools, I'll give you a funny story. So we started the year before Common Core was the big thing, and so I remember telling my wife and other teachers, Common Core is not coming into next year, but we're gonna do our videos on Common Core using that curriculum map and get a jump on it ahead of everyone. Every single teacher I said that to said to me, "Well, I wouldn't put too much money on down on the Common Core sticking." And I said, "Well, it's a big thing. It's going to last." And they say, "No, nothing lasts. It's all 3 years and out." And sure enough, at 3 years, most states began changing away from it. Some of them didn't change away as much as they said they did. They just changed the name at the top of the curriculum map. But it was amazing that the teachers will tell me that new curriculum, new ideas for how to teach come and go all the time, and they're constantly being told how to teach, and they don't like it. My wife's been teaching for 22 years. One of the things she would tell you is that she can take her class after a week. She can tell you which kids like to work alone, which like to work in groups, which of them are really good at, which ones you can really get on their case and they'll get moving, and which ones will shut down if you get on. So you have to know how, like a coach, you have to know how to manage all of the personalities and where they all are in the classroom. And a good teacher can do that. But if the teacher's being told you can only do it one or two ways, well, that's a problem also. There was a Stanford and a Harvard study back this up where they went and they looked at charter schools and private schools. They didn't come up with the behavioral issue as the reason for private schools doing better. Their analogy was that in private schools and in most charter schools, the teachers are given the goal at the end of the year. This is the curriculum we want them to learn. And then the teacher using their best methods and how they believe in teaching it can go and get it done and teach the kids at the speed they need to teach They can slow down, speed up as needed. They can teach it in circular. They can do whatever they want to do, but as long as the kids learn the lessons, that was what they came out of this study that went on for 5 years and spent millions of dollars. That was what they determined. But public school just does not operate that way at all. I'll tell you another funny story. I had a teacher. We had her, I flew her here from Florida to Georgia to do her math videos because everyone told me at this conference I was at, she's amazing. She came from Lockheed. She literally gave up a $300,000 a year job because she just felt the need to teach. And she was amazing. She told me when she came here, she said, the beginning of the school year before the students came back, they were all in the gymnasium. All the teachers were having a meeting with the administration, and they asked her to stand up, and they all gave her an applause because she had taken her class and they had all tested in math above the level. They had made big gains, and it was recognizable that she had done a great job. And then she said, but 15 minutes later, they told me that we're not going to do it that way, though, this year. We're going to do this new method. And that just doesn't make any sense to people outside of education. If you were in a corporate environment, and I've seen this, and let's say one sales team was knocking it out of the park, they would have that sales team come and they would have all the other sales teams come to the same meeting, and they would have the sales team that was doing well say, tell us what you're doing to get such great results, because we want to mirror that. You model it for us, show us what's going on, and we will take that method and we'll run with it. In education, it seems like it's the other way around, at least in public education, where you may be doing great, but you're not going to do it that way next year because we have a grant or we have a new idea or someone at the district took over language arts and they want us to use this program. What's working and isn't working doesn't seem to really play into the decision making.
That autonomy piece that we're talking about now is just so important to job satisfaction across the
Hmm.
board. That is one of the main indicators about whether someone is satisfied in their career. And pick your career,
Yeah.
teaching, finance, whatever it is. The autonomy piece is huge. And yeah, I know plenty of people working in public schools, teachers, principals,
Hmm.
superintendents, and I hear from all of them, I would love to do this thing, but I'm not allowed
Hmm.
to because of whatever the level above me is, whether that's teachers talking about their administrators, administrators talking
Hmm.
about their superintendents, or superintendents even talking about the state legislature and their governor about new rules that have been added to it. It seems to me that we handcuff all the people who know what they're doing
Yeah.
and tell them, well, I know you think you know, but you don't really know. Trust me, I know, even though I've never been been in a classroom,
Yes.
right? And so
Yes.
I'm gonna guess that you've seen some of that firsthand. And so we've talked a little
Yeah.
bit about some of the problems facing teachers. Are there other problems facing schools more generally?
Well, I think the autism thing is not getting enough attention. It is now that RFK is in place because that's a big thing on his to-do list. Um, a lot of teachers told me the notion that it's just being better diagnosed is not the case. That they're seeing that just witnessing what they're witnessing and seeing how fast that autistic population is growing in the schools was alarming to them even 5, 10 years ago. And I know of a school nearby here um, because I know the husband whose wife teaches there. They don't have enough teachers to teach in those classrooms because they're not qualified. There's really no good protocol right now about how to teach or deal with autism because it runs such a spectrum. You can have, I think my grandchild's probably autistic, but he's functional. But I've seen we have some friends who don't live far from us whose child is not very functional, doesn't speak, and basically just is not functional. And it's sad. But I think that that's one of the things that's facing schools. I would say the other thing too is that I have talked to principal. I'll give you a story. So there's a guy in this county where I'm at. He was a principal at several high schools, and he's retired. He's been retired for about maybe 8 or 9 years now. He he was known as the fixer, which meant that he would be sent into a high school that was not doing well and they had leadership issues, and it was his job to get in there and straighten everything out. And they sent him for to you remember the movie Stand and Deliver? Is it Stand and Deliver or was it Stand By? It was the one with the principal who carried the stick, and he was in an inner city school, and they paid for him to go and shadow him for 6 months in the 90s. And what he learned, he came back and he had one school in our county where the teachers were all threatening to quit because there was a lot of gang activity, and it wasn't safe. There was a lot of students dropping out because the bullying. Teachers were scared, and he went in and expelled 116 people within 3 days. And all the teachers stayed. The grades came up. He talked to the parents, had a long meeting with them that he was going to get the bullying under control, that the kids who were causing the problems were going to have to be gone. He would move them to an alternative school. And it worked. But when I was interviewing him, and this would have been in 2024, 3, he said they would never let me do that now.
Hmm.
They would never let me do that. And I think that's probably true. Many teachers I spoke to, every time behavior comes up, they do not feel like they are supported,
Mhm.
that the administration doesn't want to deal with the parents. And so they just keep sending them back to the class. I had one teacher tell me there was a kid who literally would use the F word in second grade. Um, and was hateful about it, like would point at her and then say, it was a situation and it was disruptive to the rest of the class. She said she just kept sending him down to the office, and he would come back with candy. And I remember when she told me that, I knew where she was going with this. I said that, but you're just rewarding the wrong thing. You can't reward bad behavior and expect to get less of it. And she understood that too, but the office didn't know what else to do. When I was a kid, just for instance, real quick,
Mhm.
that wouldn't have been tolerated at all. I can't even remember anyone using an F word in second grade on a teacher. And I can promise I grew up in a small country town. That would have been uh, your pants on fire kind of
You're right.
moment at home.
That's what I was just going to say too, is that yeah, something happens at school. I mean, as a kid, I'd get it at home too. Um,
Yeah.
but here's just a thought. So I'm a member actually of a Facebook group where that's the topic about why are teachers leaving the profession, and a lot of people just get on
Mhm.
an event. It's kind of interesting to read at bare level, and what I'm seeing on there is exactly what you're talking about as well. I'm seeing like, that's it's just real time data that keeps on happening over
Yeah.
and over and over and over again. So here's what I think the $1 million question is: what do we do about it? How do we do a better job? How do schools, how do states, how does anybody in a supportive role do a better job so that we can support our teachers, leading to more effective education for our students?
Well, I think that the first thing you have to do is you have to deal with behavior. And I know that a lot of school districts are probably afraid of getting sued or whatnot, but I think you have to lay down certain rules and say this is the line. If your child is over this line, we're not going to not educate them, but we're going to have an alternative means of doing that. I don't think that alternative school online is a good idea because a child who's not disciplined enough is probably not getting online. So maybe they have to go to an alternative school. I don't know there has to be a good way of dealing with that, but you cannot just leave them in the class. Here's the other thing that's funny about that is they'll say, well, we don't want the child out of the classroom because they need to be educated. But you're disrupting. another 20 kids.
Hmm.
And so I'm not sure how the one child or two children or students are superseding the rest of the class. But in most cases, teachers would tell me that when they would, and you probably know this, so they, before the school year, right, like that week before, they would look at their enrollment of who was going to be in their class for that year, and I guess it has flags for the different things that are on their chart, like behavioral issues or you know and so they can kind of tell what kind of year it's going to be based on the children that are going to be in their class. But it's bigger than that, too. Most of the older teachers I spoke to said it's not just that kids are getting away with worse behavior. It seems like it's more acceptable now. Whereas I was taught that I never talked back to an adult. Even in high school, I might have been a sarcastic, and I was definitely a smart, mouth, but I never would have been that disrespectful to an adult. I just wasn't raised that way. And it doesn't seem like a lot of kids are being raised to respect at least an authority figure. And some of them may never even meet one until they're in the back of a squad car at some point. But you, you, I think that you have to set the line and say, this is, you're over the line where your kids come here. I'm imagining that in private school because my kids went to private school briefly. I had to sign something saying, about behavior. I guarantee to keep and if they act this or that way, or if we determine that your child is disruptive to the rest of the school, then you can't be at this private school anymore. I don't see why that's a problem in public school. You just have to manage it better. But if you can take away some of the behavior issues, you will lessen the stress on the teachers and you will hold on to more of them. There's such a teacher shortage, by the way, in this country. The state of Georgia, this will benefit a lot of teachers. They just enacted a new rule so you can retire when it's your time to retire. You'll get paid your 60% for your pension, and because they still need teachers so badly, you can then be rehired at full pay, receive your full pay, and receive your pension at the same time. So
Wow.
I already told my wife, I'm like, baby, you can buy us a boat.
There you go.
Like you'll be doing so well, I could retire. But the that's how bad it's gotten, and it shouldn't be that bad.
Mm-mm.
If you want to keep in anybody in any profession, you have to treat them better. And I worry that too many people think that technology will just solve this. And I
Mhm.
just don't think that's the case. And I'm not sure how technology is going to handle behavioral issues.
Well, you even said that finances was the third issue, and so I even
Yeah.
venture to guess that people who could retire and be rehired, they'd be like, "Peace out. I'm not doing that because it hasn't eliminated the top two reasons why I wanted to leave in the first place, right? And my sanity is more
Yeah.
important than money." I have a
Yeah.
feeling we'll probably see something like that.
You probably would. And a couple of people who I brought that up to have said, well, I'd have to really weigh that
Hmm.
against my sanity and my stress. Um, I think that that's I think that is sad. I would also say the other thing is that it depends on what state you're in. Some of the some states they're they're not really so there's so many other things that teachers are required to teach, like social and emotional learning, which is not a bad thing necessarily, but some places it gets a little heavy-handed. And I think that if you want to bring education back to where everyone is well educated, we have to kind of strip it down and go back to basics. Um, I don't really want the school system to, in my case, and you're all a Christian school, so I imagine you understand this, that I don't necessarily want someone teaching my kid, you know, social and emotional things that I'm not aware of. I would like to have a little hand in that. I think more parents should. Some parents give it up to the school because maybe it's lazy parenting. That might be presumptuous on my part, but I feel like that if we stripped it down and we went back to the basics, math, language arts, science, history, reading, right, all of the basics. I just want kids to be able to go through school, get out with a really good base of education that they can move on with. Look at the inner city schools. I just looked at a chart yesterday where Baltimore City Schools last year graduated not one kid at grade level in math and reading. That makes no sense. But at the same time, they're bragging that 74% of their students graduated. Those two things don't add up. And you're sending these. The problem with that I have trouble processing is that a lot of the people who say, well, we have to move them along or graduate them, they say we don't want to hurt their feelings or we don't want them to have low self-esteem. Well, how low self-esteem are you going to be when you're 10 years out of school? You can't get into college because you can't do math or read. You can't get a good job because you can't do the basics. You're not helping these students long term if you're just allowing them to get out with no education. And I know you can't retain them forever. That's not
Mhm.
a solution either.
We've really put our public schools in an impossible situation, right?
We
And
have.
I am all for, yeah, people should be able to choose the school they want to go to, whether that's a public one or a private one, whether that's an independent
Yeah.
one or a religious one. If you decide this is the best fit for your kid, that's where I want you to be able to send your kid. And we
Hmm.
ask so much of our public schools, and it is ridiculous to assume they can do everything everyone asks them to do. Every parent goes in
Yeah.
there with a different set of expectations. That you could have two kids in the same class, and one parent could be totally happy with how everything is, and one parent would want everything changed. And if you change everything, then all of a sudden you've upset that other parent, right? And
Yes.
so I'm glad we are at least having the conversation about some of the things that we've noticed in education and your perspective on it. So I just want to thank you for being on here today, talking about this stuff with us. One of the things we always like to do is include contact information. So if somebody's listening and they're like, I really
Hmm.
need to pick Brian's brain about this, you okay if I include your email in our description
Absolutely.
here? Perfect.
Absolutely. Yes.
Awesome. Thank you, Brian.
You're welcome.
Yeah, we definitely appreciate it. I know you have some materials that you've produced as well, and so I would encourage any listener to go and have a look at those things because I know
Yeah.
you dive a lot deeper into these topics there, and they're topics like we've been saying they can't be ignored. So I'd like to maybe just close us off then with a word of prayer, and we'll lift
Sure.
this all up to the Lord. Heavenly Father, thank you so much for all the gifts that you give us, God. Thanks for the gift of the world that you've created and the mysteries that lie within. And as we in education try to unravel those mysteries for our students, we know it comes with great successes and light bulb moments and joy, but it also comes with a lot of struggles too. Getting to know each student, how they tick, what makes them work, and we lift them up to you as they go through their developmental journey. We also lift up the teachers who are taking them through that journey. Teaching is not an easy profession, Lord, but you've promised to be at our side, and so we're thankful that you are there. I thank you for people like Brian who are addressing the issues and not looking the other way, but saying, let's tackle this head on for the sake of our students as they continue to grow. So we ask for your continued blessing upon him and his work and all those who teach and all those who learn in our schools. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen.
Amen. Amen.